Hello and welcome to the Outcomes Over Hours show. I'm Tina Patterson and I'm super excited for my guest today, who is Donald Bauer. Donald is the CTO for HR at the US Department of State, where they've got over 30,000 employees. And one of the reasons I really wanted Donald on my show was what he actually has on his LinkedIn bio. So what he talks about is his employment objective is to add value, to mentor talent, and to make a difference. And when I read that, I just went, okay, we are absolutely aligned. I have to have Donald on my show. So Donald, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, I would love to start with, I know that you love both technology and HR, but leadership has been a really key theme throughout your career. Could you tell us a little bit about your leadership style and particularly how it might have changed if you think before the pandemic, through the pandemic, and now where we're back to this way of hybrid working for a lot of organizations?
Yeah, I mean, I started out in the military and spent 14 years in the United States Navy and worked my way from enlisted guy all the way up through senior enlisted, and then as an officer. Went through a lot of training with that. And I think that's kind of where I honed my recognition that when managing people, you have to manage to a person. This idea that you can have a style and that everybody's just supposed to basically do what you want them to do based on your style, I found was not very effective. I literally had to understand an individual to get the most out of them and from a leadership standpoint. Fast forward, I got out of the Navy, started a company back in 1998 with a couple of colleagues, and we did federal HR as a product. We were one of the first private companies to do online jobs for the federal government. And that's now, it was a company called Quick Hire, which is now called Monster Hiring Management. And Monster is still a very popular company, and they still service a good 60 or 70 federal agencies. Well, when we started that company, it's a little bit different animal when you have a startup, and I gathered my first 7 or 8 people, and we were all together, and then we were growing very quickly. And the reality is, as a founder, it's like, well, I need to make sure everything's done right and focus. And I know we talked earlier about just the energy. I think at one point I approached my partners and said, I've been doing, in the first 6 months of this year, I've recorded 3,200 hours of work in 6 months. It was crazy. 90, 100, 120 hours a week, 7 days a week. As a startup, it was like, whatever it took. And then I got to the point where some of my staff was like, hey, if you don't let us do some work too, we're going to leave. That idea of letting go of your baby and of the idea. So that was the first step. And then understanding from a corporate culture standpoint, what did we want to portray as an organization? Taking care of people, work-life balance. This is back in the late 90s. And then really the next level, of course, was we became dysfunctional as a team. The leadership, the 3 owners, one was finance, one was business, and I was technology. We had different ways of interacting with people, and our team was coined the 3-headed monster. And, so my staff, we don't know what the 3-headed monster is going to say because they got different information. And ultimately, me being an extrovert and being an entrepreneur and, getting a bunch of people in the room and saying, I have this great idea. And half of the staff would look at you and just kind of sit there, and the other half like, yay. And then that was the realization of the idea of the introverts and extroverts, and realization that, okay, if we're going to be functional as a team, we need to go a little bit deeper into how we interact as individuals. And so we did the Myers-Briggs, and we brought a group in, and they did a whole bunch of analysis on us. And then, that's where I got the education of, if you have a team full of introverts, which are typically very well regarded because they're thoughtful, they're insightful, they're deep thinkers, they bring great value to teams, but you can't just walk up to them and go, what do you think? And have them give you an instantaneous response. And in some cases, a lot of times I got frustrated because I had this great idea and I expected this huge yay from the back room, and I didn't get it. And then once I learned about this whole, the individuals and the way that they interact, I was like, I had this great idea, and I would present it and I would say, think about it. Tell me what you think. And they'd come back the next day. And so it's this incremental like realization that the more and more that you interact with individuals from a leadership standpoint, the more you need to understand about them, how they think, how they operate, and more, and all of that kind of culminates in a high performing team. And I think that's, so the skills that I've acquired over the years has really become identifying individuals, looking for those people, those, and I hate to say diamonds in the rough because some of them are not, they're just good people, high performers, but then presenting them with an opportunity and the right environment to thrive, right? So from a leadership style is really understanding, what do you like to do? What is your thing? How do you like to operate? And then really weaving that into a corporate culture where the majority of the organization can kind of do their thing, but it's all in a common direction with a common goal. And of course, pandemic hit. And the first reaction was, woohoo, we get to work from home, because we had no telework prior to pandemic, zero.
Right.
Because of the way our infrastructure was set up, the State Department was not necessarily what I consider to be forward leaning on that, because there's just a lot of security involved. Yep. And so we went from no telework to we got to start working from home immediately. And
wow.
And I made CTO on the 14th of March, and on the 17th of March, they said, everybody go home. We're in a pandemic. And leadership looked at me and goes, what are you going to do, Don?
Yeah.
And of course, prior to pandemic, for the probably 3 or 4 years, I had been slowly building, what I consider to be a really awesome team. Finding those individuals, giving them the freedom to go innovate. We were behind, we had a ton of technical debt. So we were really working on modernizing in a very, what I would consider to be orderly fashion. The idea of, we're 10 years behind and we're not going to catch up overnight. So here again, that not killing people to get something done, but really providing some strategic vision. And people always say that to me, and it's hard for me to articulate. It's like, oh, Don, you have great vision. And I'm like, well, I just say we're going there and we need to get there. I really never think about how it's articulated, but the idea was say, well, we have to eat this elephant one bite at a time. Let's pick small projects to slowly, incrementally get us to that next place where we need to be organizationally. Prior leadership had really thrashed the teams. It's jumping from one fire to the next. Everything's an emergency. Oh, this is end of life. Fix it, replace it, upgrade it. This is end of life. Oh, and so the ankle biters, as I call them, they just never stop. And the team was just overwhelmed. And I said, no, here, let's do this. Let's work methodically. And so we put a plan together and started working through with our modernization. So when it came time to go to pandemic, we already had a good working rhythm, but we had not done any remote work at all.
Oh, wow.
And so I said, everybody was told to stay home. And I said, you know what, if my team is driving to the office every day because they had to from an operational standpoint, I would be there with them too. And I didn't, no big sacrifices. Like, look, that's, to me, my presence sent the message that, look, I'm not going to sit at home and while you're taking the risk to drive to work, do it. I would be there. And I said, I will stay here until we're ready to go. And the amazing thing is, in 4 weeks, we took every HR application that we had, which is over 70 of them. And in 4 weeks, they were all online. And we track the amount of time it's spent, and it was 4,000 man hours over a month. Now I have a pretty large team. I have about 300 people that work on my team. But in 4 weeks, and we have ERP systems and PeopleSoft, which doesn't allow reverse proxy. We stood up separate app servers. Oracle came to the table and said, how can we help you guys solution? But it was just really interesting, just collegial, let's get it done. Nobody worked, 100-hour weeks, but we kept a focus on how do we get our applications online. Microsoft came to the table with this proxy platform that they provided, and we started putting things online one at a time. And so here we are 3 years later, because this is March of 2020 when this happened. We were still, to this day, we're still the only bureau in the entire department that got all of our applications online. There are still applications that are still not online. And the second major hurdle that we faced organizationally was server administration, which that requires elevated access. And I told my team, they gave us an exception where they let people actually remote into their desktops from home, which was kind of breaking a lot of rules. But because of the situation, they let us do that. And I told my team, I said, look, guys, I said, we need to come up with a solution for the long term that says this exception is going to go away eventually. It took us 3 years to build the technology to remotely manage our platforms. But as of April, we actually have the appropriate technology in place where my entire organization, we can run the entire show remotely, administrate servers, DBAs, everything remotely. But it took that long. And it was, again, that idea of, okay, I know it's pandemic and we just got all of our systems online, but we need today to start working on it because it literally took 3 years to work through all the hurdles, all the approvals, all the appropriate. We had to run test builds. We had to do penetration testing because of the security aspect of it.
Absolutely.
But because we started right away, and from a strategic standpoint. And so, to me, that has been the really big benefit is, one thing I've learned and that's evolved for me, and I know this is a very lengthy way to describe it, but the real value or the real benefit that I see in the way my leadership styles evolve beyond the human management piece has been strategic vision, right? You have to look ahead. And sometimes you're the only person in the room that has that horizon view because everybody's like this doing their day-to-day jobs. Somebody's got to be in the back room saying, well, what's coming next? How are we going to get there? What are the different steps that we need to take? And how do we point everybody in the right direction without, again, thrashing them and making sure that they don't implode by doing that. And of course, the other side of pandemic was there's this interesting thing, and I'm sure this has come up multiple times. Here in the Washington, D.C. area, the average commute for most people was an hour to sometimes 3 each way. So, we had people that literally anywhere from 2 to 2.5 hours in and home, and they would come to work every single day and pay $300 a month to park and do their jobs. And pandemic hit. And so I had this weird phenomenon where these people were putting in 12, 13 hours a day. And they're saying, hey, I'm happy to give you these extra hours because I would have been sitting in my car anyway.
Wow.
Right. That idea of that. And, at some point I was like, no, stop, unplug, because the lines between work and home were getting severely blurred. And, now a lot of people dove into their work as a distraction because they had nothing to do at home. But so there was some things to kind of be mindful of, but it almost took an opposite kind of mindset with the organization, the team. It's like, I get emails at night. I'm like, I don't want to see emails from you at 8 o'clock at night. You need to be unplugged. You need to be like sitting with your kid, binge something on Netflix, go away, because I don't want that person coming to me, 6 months from now going, I love this job, but I can't take it anymore. Right. Because they burned themselves out. So, that's been a real interesting challenge. But, the one thing that I've done, there's a series of things that I've done from a leadership standpoint. I do a biweekly newsletter, and I've been, I think we just did the 110th issue, and we've only missed one since 2018, of just every 2 weeks putting out the reminder for self-care, the reminder, hey, this movie's coming out this weekend, a little bit of distraction, organizational priorities. I have an actual coach on my staff. She always has the coach's corner where we talk about something with leadership or something, little reminders and things to do. And of course, we added a diversity and inclusion individual to our team. So we have a diversity section now called All the Difference in the newsletter, where she's like, do you know about different religions? What's Ramadan? Things where sometimes people don't know who to ask. So it's really nice. It's not a finger wagging in your face, but more of like, hey, we need to appreciate each other's differences and why we're
Absolutely.
different as much as anything else. So, it's kind of evolved into this, and I send it to all of my senior leaders, even though it is for my organization, to kind of say, hey, this is what we're talking about. This is what we're doing. But I have a section that is dedicated. It's called self-care corner, where we say, okay, do this week, or do that, or, take a drive, or, hey, I'm okay if you take a 20-minute walk during the working hours, right? And get some sunshine, because vitamin D,
Yeah.
instead of people sitting at their desk, because there's this other thing that's happening that I've seen in industry now, is that there's all of this talk of these CEOs and these organizations with monitoring software, and they're making sure somebody's not, they're clicking and counting keystrokes. And I'm just like, wow, how, yeah, exactly. It's a little scary, because I can tell you, if somebody did that to me, I would be gone in a minute.
Me too.
I wouldn't even give them the luxury of a notice. I would just say, if you don't trust me enough to be an employee. And it's interesting, because there's a lot of different leadership styles out there. And the biggest challenge I think I faced with my peers, other leaders that I work with on a regular basis, especially executives, is that idea that if you don't see them, they may not be working.
Yeah.
And I was like, and when those conversations do come up on occasion, it's like, yes, but did you stand behind them at their desk the entire day they were working? And they were like, no. Then what? You were in your office. You don't know if they were working or not. You know what they were doing. No, you have no basis to make an argument that says, if I can't see them, they're not working. Which ironically brings us to this outcome-based thing.
Yeah.
And I told all my managers that that's what we look for. People are going, the other thing that I can say that pandemic did for me, or that I did, you don't know the challenges any individual may be facing at home, right? Yeah. It really, really upset everybody's world. Family members, elder care, daycare, you name it.
Yeah.
And so many people tried to put these things into a box, so it'd be nice and neat and pretty, so that you had this very empirical way of saying, well, this is how I know you're doing your job. And, I told my teams, I said, look, we're all going to have good days and bad days. I said, I got sick. I would tell you, of my team of 300, we probably had 25 deaths of either family members or employees, or immediate family, not like distant family. Distant family was even worse from COVID. And boy, that really rings home when somebody, and
absolutely.
And so the idea that somebody's got their boss breathing down their neck because they didn't respond to an email within 3 minutes of receiving it.
Yeah.
It seems laughable, but some people did go through that during the pandemic. And I told my entire leadership team, I said, look, let's work on productivity. Let's focus on outcomes. And during that, I think the even more notable thing was, during the pandemic, we upgraded our ERP, and we did it in half the time that they predicted it would take, with half the cost. They predicted 25 million in 3 years. We did it in 18 months for $12 million. Wow. We rolled it out, and we had 0 hiccups. We were the only platform in the department that rolled out a large system without any kind of, people complaining that
what's expected. Yeah.
And we didn't beat anybody up. We didn't thrash them. We just, had a very methodical approach. I had a really good team. We did thorough testing. And, the idea was that, and in the ERP world, so because they're so big and so expensive, it's like leadership goes boom, and they put this stake in the ground and says, you will be done by this date. And it's always set to fail because something doesn't, and my senior advisor came to me, and we were supposed to go live at the end of January, February. And he says, I don't think we're ready. And I'm like, okay, then we don't go. And he looks at me, and I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, but we've told people that I said, so we go and we look like fools and we have people stressed out because they can't do their job, or we delay it and we do it the right way.
Yeah.
We ended up going live in June, and because we didn't have a stake in the ground, I didn't necessarily say we were late. I said we'd go when we were ready.
Yep.
So we had a couple of major events that happened in the organization, like performance evaluations and things where we couldn't take the system offline. We had to take it down for 5 days to upgrade it, to run all the stuff. So if we didn't make the April date, we had to wait till June. Fine, we wait till June, which is to give us more time to test. But we went live, no harm, no foul. Everybody was happy with it. And it got to the point where, because there were other events that happened in the department that weren't as successful, we kind of got forgotten about. And at the end of the year, I'm like, well, wait a minute. We had the success, it's like, let's have the high fives, because you didn't know we upgraded. That's the biggest compliment.
That's amazing. Yeah.
On a platform. But that just speaks to the performance of the team, and the idea that we really are focused on, what are the outcomes, what's productivity. And then, to be honest, in July and after we went live in June, July, August, and September, quiet. So in other words, we didn't dump another major project on the team's lap. We're just like, let's stabilize, let's work on documentation. Let's take a breath here, take some leave, take some time off, take a 3-day weekend, but really let the team kind of, maybe, I would say, I don't know about bask in their success, but more importantly, let the pressure off that says, look, we have coverage, we have competence. Hey, if you want to take some time off. And many did, which was good. I mean, the idea is that it's kind of like, you did a great thing for me. Let me do a little something for you in return by not like dumping the next 10 months worth of work in your lap and saying, get it done. And as a result, we're just, it's nice. I mean, it's taken about 6 or 7 years to get here with the culture and the organization. But now it's the point where they passed something in the Defense Act in December. I heard about it in January. We went live with it in March. We added special pay for overseas teleworkers. And before that, before this current situation, that would have taken 9 to 10 months easily.
Wow.
And we did it in 3. And it went off without any kind of major drama. No drama, and which is nice. I mean, I like the fact that there's no drama. I like telling my boss that I had a meeting today, and he goes, "So what do you have to report today?" I'm like, "I'm happy to say that every problem that came across my desk was solved. I don't have anything for you." And he just looked at me and smiled. He goes, "Thank you." He says, "That's the way I like to, have my day go, is that nothing has to bubble up." Exactly.
Oh, Donald, I absolutely love that. As you're talking, one of the things that I find just brilliant that you've been talking about, you're talking earlier about the importance of vision, which most leaders would say, yep, I know I need to do that. But how you've been able to, leading your department, think through the long-term vision, while also having a very strong eye on the short term, what needs to get done in the immediate future. But also what I love about how you're talking about it was not only for your department, but for individuals as well, to think through, okay, short term, you're on a high pressure project, but after that, let's have a little bit of space before we throw you on the next one. So from a longevity standpoint of you wanting to stay in my team and be in part of a high performing team, we're thinking about the marathon as well. And I love that, how you were able to kind of go between it at an individual person level. And as you're saying, manage the person as well as for the work itself. So I think it's genius. I love that.
Well, thank you. And I have a good leadership team too, so I can't take all the credit. But I will say, it's kind of interesting that from that standpoint of just how we take care of our individuals. And, I have 330 people in my organization. I've only had like 4 people leave in the last 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we have literally, and one of those persons, we walked out the door because we didn't feel they were giving customer service at the level we expected from the help desk. but we've only lost 3 or 4 people. And a couple of them
Wow.
didn't want to leave. They left because of life events or,
Yep.
moving, my family, my mother, we're
Yep.
going off, I was like, okay, and a couple of them asked to come back. So yeah, it's pretty nice when we have very, very stable organizations. So
yeah. And I keep going on about when you have leaders who trust you and empower you and you're working on meaningful things, why would you want to go somewhere else as well? So yeah, absolute kudos to you. Well, that's a good segue. I'd love to hear from you if you think about where we are now, where, as we were talking about, for most organizations, it's hybrid, where their people are sometimes in the office, sometimes not. They're not always face-to-face. What are the 2 to 3 skills that you think that leaders should be focusing on as we think about the coming decades and leading high-performing teams? What are the leadership traits that you think people should be amplifying?
Well, I think your outcomes is definitely a place to start with. I think, it's interesting when you start going down the DEI path, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion, but the really important thing I feel like that you have to go the extra mile for is the I, inclusive. And hybrid meetings, there's this mindset, and it's interesting because I read a lot of articles about hybrid and future work. I've actually presented in an executive forum for Office of Personnel Management on hybrid work environments and things. And one of the things that continuously comes up with hybrid work is, there's this perception that if somebody's there, they're going to get the promotion, they're going to get the attention, they're going to get the leg up on their colleagues who may not be there. And, it goes back to what I'd said earlier. We're still not recovered from pandemic. There are still, many of the small little boutique childcare places shut down. They went out of business. So there isn't this, okay, pandemic's over. Nope, there's nobody there to take their children to. So and the women are disproportionately affected by this, those that were homemakers, which, is unfortunate, because I think women in technology add a very rich dimension to problem solving and ideas and approaches. So what I told my organization, I said, look, there's this, we were 100% remote, but I can tell you, I went to the office 2 days a week for the entire pandemic. And most of my leadership team, somebody was on site at least once or twice a week. A couple hours, 3 hours, whatever. But that idea of somebody always there. I did have a certain few members of my team that were on site every day because they were the VIP help desk. They were helping the leaders.
Made sense for their role.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So now we're in this, we're kind of pulling back from the pandemic, and there's this drumbeat back in the office. None of the reasons to come back to the office to me are legitimate, right? So now I look at when I tell somebody they need to come to the office, now I'm asking them to actually, it's an expense. It's, it's something that they have to absorb into their household finances. And if it's $28 a day to park and they're an hour and a half in their car each way, and then potentially that starts to get expensive. And so I like to be a little mindful of that. So what I've told my teams is like, look, if we're going to have hybrid meetings, then we need to do hybrid good. We need to be good at it. So they've got these new video cameras out, which they sit at the base of in the conference room. And when somebody talks, it literally focuses on them and zooms in, because that's the worst thing in a meeting. If you're in the other end and you see this table full of people and you see these little tiny heads and somebody's talking, you don't know, you can't see what they're saying. So this is like, okay, this is technology that is going to make it a little bit, even the playing field a little bit.
Absolutely.
And the other thing about the inclusive side of it is, I think we all have the camera thing, because there's some people that just refuse to turn their cameras on. They have an issue with it. I've kind of come to accept that, because I'm the guy on every meeting. I have my camera on. It doesn't matter.
Me too.
And people are, and then I find out later on, somebody will send me a screenshot. Their screen is just me during the meeting, because I'm the only one with my camera on. So if I even like so much as pick my nose or something, they're like, I saw you, it's like, that was not my plan, right? I'm just trying to be present. But the idea is that I tell my leaders, if you have hybrid meetings, you need to be intentional about going around the room The room means everybody, not just who's in the room, and giving everybody an opportunity to contribute to the conversation so they feel, number one, included, and they feel like they have us, they're part of what's going on. Because there are those quiet little individuals who will sit back. They'll sit there in a whole meeting, won't say a word. They may have great insight, but they don't feel like there's an opportunity to contribute. So you have to be very intentional about having them contribute. I kind of feel like those are the kinds of situations I feel like, and we need to get better at it, myself included. But it's something that's always tip of mind for me, that when we have these meetings, making sure that everyone has a chance to contribute to the conversation. And then also, more importantly, the other side effect, which was not positive, was somebody sends out a meeting blast. And I got 70 people in a meeting that needs like 6, right? Because it's virtual. Used to be, we had a conference room and only so many people could fit in the conference room. Well, now there is no limit to how many people can attend a meeting. So we have to actually go on the other side and say, make sure we have some meeting discipline. Not everybody needs to come, because some of these guys are billing me by the hour, and if they're not listening to me, they're not doing their job.
I have a module called Meeting Madness, because I think we have gone too extreme of everything's a meeting these days. And we'll invite the 70 people. And obviously, to be really effective, that isn't always a great use of time. Absolutely. I love what you say, though, about being intentional. And that's one of the things that I think for people listening that I hope they get out of this, of when you're doing hybrid, being intentional is really, really important as a leader. So you don't just get on the call with the 70 people and go, oh, now this is a waste of time, but you think beforehand of, who should I invite to the meeting? Or hang on, this looks like it's way too many people. Should we have a conversation? But to go, hey, maybe we just change it a little bit, because that's not the best use of everyone's time. I love that though, Donald. So
I will say, speaking of one more thing about meetings, I instituted a no meeting Monday policy in my organization. So basically, there are no standing meetings on Mondays. You're allowed to have meetings, but those are the organic, like, let's chat, let's catch up.
Yeah, beautiful.
So it's off limits, because so many people, like, I need some time to actually do my job.
Absolutely. So I'd love to hear, what is the best, most practical advice you've been given to allow you to work smarter?
Best advice given to work smarter. Ooh, that's a good one. I have to give credit to my leadership, because when this all started out and things started to unwind with the pandemic, leadership was like, I'm not here to tell you how to run your organization. If you're effective and you deliver on the mission, how you organize, who comes to work, who's not here, is your decision to make on your own. And I kind of feel like, I know that's not advice, but that's that top cover from the organization that says, as an office director, I can determine who needs, if people need to be in the office or not in the office, and really be of the mindset that, all my leadership cares about is that the mission gets accomplished. Yep. My job from a leadership standpoint is to make sure it's not the same few people doing all the work, which is the outcomes, right? But not necessarily the idea. And the other thing that we've done that I think is really kind of cool, and it did start with our leadership, is what they call flexing. So the idea is that you encourage your leaders to take time off, and you tell them to appoint somebody to act on their behalf while they're gone, to let that individual flex into that role and, have a seat for the day. And we demonstrate that. And the other side of that, of course, is we call them leave buddies and time off. Nobody is too important to have time off. And that was the other thing that we always ensure. It's like, I don't care how smart you are or how integral you are to the organization, you need a backup, and you should be able to take time off and not worry about something going south while you're out of there. So.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that so much, Donald. Well, I would love for us to finish off our interview with some rapid fire questions. Are you up for that?
Yeah.
Okay. What is the best purchase you've made in the last few years for under, say, $100?
Yes, purchase. Frost Buddy. Seriously, this is called a Frost Buddy.
Yeah.
And I'm not compensated.
Yeah. What does it
This
do?
it holds beer, it holds soda, it holds whatever. I can set this out in 90-degree heat in the sun and it will keep the temperature cold. And they're like 40 bucks. So yeah, this
Perfect.
is best for under $100 purchase I've made.
Perfect. And what's the book that you've either recommended or gifted the most to other people?
Ooh, there's two.
Yeah.
Okay. One of them is the first 90 days. I think that's always important. If you're a leader and you're going into a place, you need to read the first 90 days because you should not do any major changes until you have an opportunity to see what's going on. And the other one, which I learned kind of the hard way, is the book Brief. Because when you start to move up the chain from a leadership standpoint, some of the senior leaders don't want the gory technical details. They want a yes or a no. And you have to train yourself to be able to say what you mean very succinctly, that there's this term bluff, bottom line up front. Instead of writing an email that's 6 miles long and then you ask a little question at the end, you put the question at the beginning and you say background below. The idea is leaders have a lot of decisions to make. They want to see the question, they want to understand it, and then make a decision to move on. And they don't need you sitting there wasting 10 minutes explaining all the details.
Oh, I love that so much. I don't have many pet peeves, but one when I led large teams was when someone would come up to me and say, hey, I've been thinking about it, and I think I'm thinking, and I'd go, hang on, what topic are we on? I've got 100 topics going through my mind. Can you help me narrow down? Give me a little bit of I love that, the bluff or the context before you go deep. Else, otherwise, it's really hard. I love that. So the first 90 days and brief. Excellent. Right. What's the most fearless thing you've done in the last few years?
Fearless. It's not been the last few years. Well, yeah, actually it has.
You can go back further. That's okay.
Well, when we sold our company to Monster back in 2003, I made a commitment to go racing stock cars. And I went out and bought a stock car and I raced 2 seasons of NASCAR at the local track here. I was rookie of the year my first year, top 10 in points. So I was, not a slouch. I actually have a couple of videos on YouTube that from my in-car camera in my race car. So yeah, that was my thing. And no regrets, happy I did it. And then realized it's a lot of work and those guys are really talented.
Amazing. That is truly fearless. And finally, to finish up, what does outcomes over hours mean to you?
Wow. I don't know that I could give as good a testimony as what you have on your site. I mean, I lead by outcomes. So it's funny that we met and, we're having this conversation because, that's something that I pay a lot of attention to, not only the outcomes, but ensuring that everybody has work-life balance in my organization. It doesn't always work. I try. Some people are so stubborn, they will put in the extra hours no matter what I tell them. But I always let them know that I think about that. And that is something that's very important to me. And, when you focus on the outcomes and the team sees that, because I don't micromanage. I don't know if you knew that, but that's not my style. I manage by exception. I don't manage by micromanaging. And man, I tell you, sometimes you just have to let people succeed, right? And leaders can hold them back by being too prescriptive and too directive. There's a lot of happy accidents out there that are resulting in really great things. And part of it is based on focusing on outcomes and not hours. Yeah.
Oh, I love that so much. Well, Donald, thank you so much for being here today on the Outcomes Over Hours show.
You're welcome. Thank you.